Hey, welcome to Bible 365 with Kathy Carter. That's me. I'm hosting Bible 365 means I'm reading through the Bible in 1 year, so 365 days. I'm using the 1 year chronological Bible reading plan, which you can find at oneyearbibleonline.com. I am currently out back. I'm enjoying the outback, and I have like an entire family of birds right here. So I'm hoping it doesn't get too distracting, but I do really enjoy the sound of them. So hopefully they're not louder than me. All right. So it is day 133. It is May 12th, and we are still in the book of Psalms. And so we are doing the Psalms of David, which are today Psalm 61 through 62, and then 64 through 67. So we have a handful of Psalms again today. A lot of these are very similar. So I don't want to say they're starting to get repetitive, because I don't mean it to sound like they're a burden or they're boring or they don't offer any information. But a lot of this, we're going to start to see that David is repeating these things, which I actually think is a really good and important thing for us to understand. So David is repeating these things not because he has nothing else to say or because he's still stuck in the same exact place, but David is repeating these things because it's just a day-to-day thing. It's things that happen to him all the time, and so he's reaching out to God in all of the things, and a lot of the things are the same things. There are days, weeks, months, and years that he's at war with the Philistines. There were days, weeks, months, and years where he was running from Saul. There were days, weeks, months, and years that he was running from Absalom, right? So there were issues that he had all the time because he lived a life as a normal human lives a life. And so for those of you who have never been with me before, David is, the David that I'm talking about is King David. He is the king over all of the tribes of Israel at this time. He hasn't died yet, although in our reading he did. But obviously when he's been writing the Psalms, he has not died yet. And he's writing these poems, instructional information, music, right? So it can be used in any number of ways, but he's writing these sometimes to himself, sometimes to other people. And a lot of it is just the way that he speaks to God. And in some ways, I know that we're not all artistic. We don't all write poetry. We don't all write music. But I feel like we can take a lot of this away of what he does. And so I can say, I don't write poetry. And I'm saying that very literally. I don't write poetry. But can I sit and can I write about God? It might not come out as beautiful as this is, but I know that I can do that. And I can do that because I understand him and I'm in a relationship with him. And so I can write things about him that I understand. Now, is it going to sound as lovely as this? Probably not. But it will be coming from my heart, not David's heart. And so it is a good way to share yourself with the Lord. So I never want to take away that it's a really good way for us, like following his example is a good way for us to be in a relationship with the Lord, because we are meant to be in a relationship with the Lord. Like, we're not finding our relationship with God through David. We're finding our relationship with God through the Holy Spirit, right? But we can use David's words to help us with that relationship. The other thing that I want to note about these is that they are great things for us to be repeating ourselves, right? These are things that are great for us to repeat to ourselves and then back to God. These are really great things to use as encouragement in our lives when things aren't in the best of places, or praise when things are in really great places, because there's a lot of times where David is just in full and complete praise of the Lord, right? He's just showing, and a couple of these are in here, telling us his wonders and his amazing things. So these are ways that Psalms can be used. They can use to help encourage and all those other things. And so David wrote those, and we get the blessing of being able to read his writing in his relationship to God, because he is a man who truly loved God, and he tried to follow him in all things. He tried to. He didn't always succeed. But when he didn't succeed, he was sure to come to him, and he was pleading his case to him and repenting, right, and being really sorrowful. So again, we're on May 12th, and we're going to start today with Psalm 61. And he just starts out right away. So this is a little bit similar to what we've seen before. Hear my cry, O God, listen to my prayer. So we know he's praying. He's in prayer with the Lord. And he says, from the ends of the earth, I call to you. I call as my heart grows faint. And so what I think, and I always like to share what I think. I'm never 100% certain, but I feel like when I'm in prayer and I'm reading this and I'm really reaching out to the Lord in these things, um, I'm trying really to understand what God is trying to say and the importance of it. It feels to me as if this is sort of in the later years of David's life. I say this because of as my heart grows faint, which could be very literal, that he's in his dying years, right? He dies at, they say, a ripe old age, right? He's an older guy, and he dies, and he is fully with the Lord when he's dying. And so he says, lead me to the rock that is higher than I. You've been my refuge. So he's just remembering of all the things that God is doing for him. And this is why I think it's in his older age, because he says, I long to dwell in your tent forever and take refuge in the shelter of your wings. You've heard my vows. You've given me heritage over those who fear your name. So he's, in essence, it's a remembrance of what has happened and a look to the future of what will happen. And we've heard a few times in these psalms that he's given about what will happen to the wicked and what will happen to the righteous. And it looks as if the righteous will continue to dwell with God for eternity, and the unrighteous will live in the land of the dead. So they will be away from God and separated from God, where the others will be with him. And so it just seems like he's maybe looking forward to this time. Although we see in verse 6, it says, increase the days of the king's life, his years for many generations. I don't know if he could live for many generations. So again, I don't know if this is a little bit of wordplay, just because he says, may he be enthroned in God's presence forever. So this is sort of maybe, again, that idea that he's just going to be living with God after his life on earth is over. He will continue to go and live with God. And then in verse 8, it just says, then I will ever sing praise of your name and fulfill my vows day after day. So he's just going to sing the praises of the Lord as he's here on earth, and he's fulfilling all the vows that he has ever given to the Lord. All right, moving on to Psalm 62. Another song of David's, Psalm of David's, verse 1, truly my soul finds rest in God. And here's what I wanted to note, that it says 3 times that God is his rock. And I want to note this because we use this expression a lot. And I just mean us as humans. And I know I've hit on this in the past, but him using this many times in this psalm just makes me kind of go back to a couple of things. That a rock is a firm foundation. So the rock is what we stand on. And so it's a really firm foundation. And so God is his firm foundation. It's what he lives his life on. So God encompasses, the Lord encompasses everything that he does. So it's his rock in that it's his stability, and it encompasses his whole life and everything he does. I can see my dog jumping around in the background, trying to eat a bee. So he is the kind of the maker of everything that we do, right? He's our rock. We stand on the rock. He created the rock. The other thing that I wanted to note about rocks is that every time that they made an altar in Genesis, they made them out of rocks. And we continue to see that too in Joshua. And we saw that I think with Moses as well. So when they were making altars, they were building them out of rocks. And so and when they made when they crossed the Jordan with the cairn, they built a cairn out of rocks. They made them have big rocks, carry them across the Jordan. And so in a lot of ways, God is represented by an actual rock. Now, I'm not going to say a rock isn't breakable, but it is strong and it is firm. And again, we would say that the earth is a rock. It consists of rock-like textures, right? So we would say that. And so this is who God is to David. So he makes sure that he knows he's his rock. He leans on him in all times, and he depends on him, and he stands on him, and his growth is from him, right? Everything comes from that. All right. So he says that he's his rock and his salvation, which means he saves him. And then in verse 3, it says, how long will you assault me? Will all of you throw me down? So here we go again with him talking a little bit about people trying to come after him, but he's leaning on the Lord. People are going to come after him, but he always leans on God. And then in verse 8, he's crying out to his people about this. Trust in him at all times, you people. Pour out your hearts to him, for God is our refuge. This is a cry out to all of us. Not everything is made for all of us. This, I believe, is made for all of those who believe on God, right? If we believe that God is God. Trust in him at all times. So even when things aren't looking good, um, even when it seems like you're not too sure, even if you have questions, even if, and I've definitely noted this in some past videos, we are now in a time where uh, there's a lot of accusations against people who love the Lord, and some of them have validity. Some of them are okay, but for the most part, they're tearing down our God because there's a lack of understanding of who He is. And it's a call for us to trust in Him and believe in Him, even when other people are saying bad things about Him. Even when other people are trying to tear Him down, we are still called to trust in Him. We trust in Him because of all these things. Like it's not that He doesn't give us shining lights in order to see who He is, so we can trust in Him. So trust Him at all times, you people. Pour out your hearts to Him when you have these questions, when you have these issues, when you're in a bad place, when you're in a good place. Share everything with God. God is not someone you only go to in the worst of times. God is someone that you are with all the time. God is someone that you want to share your entire life with at all times. Let yourself be open to Him. Share your soul with Him. He's our refuge. So then he goes down in verse 9 and 10. It says, surely the lowborn are but a breath, the highborn are but a lie. If weighed on a balance, they are nothing. Together, they are only a breath. So he's not making much of them being about people having a lot. He's not making much about people having a little, right? That's all just a breath, right? What he's talking about is the source, which is God. Don't trust in exhortations, so don't give in to any of these things, because none of that stuff matters, right? So don't give in to these worldly, wicked things. Don't trust in exhortation or put your hope in stolen goods. Don't set your heart on your money if you have money. So if you're highborn and you got a lot of stuff, don't set your heart on that. If you're lowborn, don't try and take. None of that matters. One thing God has spoken, and two things I have heard, and this is kind of an expression to reiterate things to the listener. Power belongs to you, God, and with you, Lord, is unfailing love. You reward everyone according to what they have done, not according to what they have, according to what they have done. All right, and on that one's 64, or that one was 62. Moving on to 64. He's starting out with complaining about the wicked. So this is a whole situation about the wicked. He says, hear me, my God, as I voice my complaint, protect my life from the threat of the enemy. Again, we've discussed on many occasions who the enemy is. And he's saying to hide me, that they're all kind of coming together. They're building plans together. They're getting stronger. They're working with each other. But God. So in verse 7, but God, that's the most important thing. Doesn't matter what all of them are doing. But God. God is bigger. He's better. He's stronger. He's more powerful. He has all the weapons. He's got all the toys. He will turn their own tongues against them and bring them to ruin. In verse 9, it says, all who see them will shake their heads in scorn, but all people will fear. They will proclaim the works of God and ponder what He has done. So the point is that God will lift up the righteous. So then all will fear. This is the whole reason. This is the entire reason that God plucked Israel out of Egypt and brought them into the promised land. It's so everyone would know that this was a people set apart, right? This is a people that the Lord is with. As long as they're following the Lord, this is a people group that the Lord is with. So then everyone that's around them knows that the Lord is the Lord and He's with these people, right? So like they will always know that. That's something that they'll always recognize. That's the purpose in all of these things. God's not lifting them up because they're better. God's not lifting them up because they're stronger. God's not lifting them up because they have more money. I'm sure I could go on and on about all those things. God's lifting them up because He chose them to be lifted up to show His power. I'm going to go on to a couple other ones as well, but I got a friend of mine today was asking me about why Jesus. Why did the Lord send Jesus? Why did He have to send Jesus? Why doesn't He just come out of the sky, like they bring this big giant face out of the sky and say, listen, everybody, the gist is that I'm God. You're not. You got to do everything that I say. I created all of this. Look around you. And that it is what it is, right? Like, I don't need to bring anyone. I don't need to send anybody. I'm just going to reach down and out of the sky, and I'm going to make everybody understand. And some of you might be going, oh, yeah, why wouldn't he do that? There's validity to that in some way, right? Because especially if you don't know the Lord, and you go and you say to yourself, if all I had was a little bit of proof, I would believe. That's all I need. All I need. You tell me your dumb stories. You come to me and you say that I'm supposed to follow everything that he says. He hasn't shown himself to me. He hasn't proven that he's anything. If he was really anything, he would have proved it by now. And so I'm going to say that this is what these Psalms are talking about. These Psalms, this Psalm of David, it says, God, right? So it says in verse 7, but God will shoot them with arrows. They will suddenly be struck down. All people will fear. They will proclaim the works of God and ponder what he's done. So, like, there is a reality that God does show himself. God shows himself all the time to millions of people, to people who refuse to believe he shows himself. And those of you who refuse to believe just go, nah, no, that's not God. No, he has to do this in order to prove that he's God. No, that can't be him either. I want the, and we did a little bit of it in Judges, right? Like, Gideon did this thing with a mat, a sheepskin, and he said, if you want me to do this, make it wet on this only, and everything else around it is dry. And God did it. And then he was like, Lord, I really want to trust you, but I'm scared. I'm not really sure. We already did this story. So if you haven't done the book of Judges, go back to the book of Judges, and we've already done this one. He says, Lord, I know that you did this already, but I just really want to make sure. So this time I want you to make it dry on the mat only and then wet all around. And then he woke up the next morning and that happened. And we would say, if we're cynical, we could say, it rained, like whatever, it soaked everything in and that happened to dry out, or the sun came out and that was the first thing that dried, right? If we're cynical, we can take every bit of evidence that is in front of us, that God has consistently put in front of us, and we can turn it. That was not what was in Gideon's heart, by the way. Gideon wasn't testing God. Gideon was asking God. So there's definitely a difference, right? Like, your heart is everything. So if you are seeking the Lord, if you want a relationship with God, if you are like, I don't believe, but I want to believe, he is absolutely going to open your eyes up to it. Like, I can guarantee it 100%. Try it and see, and then come back and let me know, because that's the kind of God that we have. We don't have a God that actually is trying to hide from you. Can he force you to see it? Of course. He's God. Of course he can force you to see it. Why then doesn't he? Why did he need to send Jesus? Right? And we haven't gotten that far yet, but like this, he's doing all of this from those of us who have been in the beginning. He actually was in a walking relationship with Adam and Eve. So when we say he could just put his face down out of the clouds, and he did that. He stuck his face out of the clouds. He came down and he spoke to two humans that he created. He was in a relationship with them until they broke it. And then they turned away, right? And then he wasn't in relationship with them anymore because they didn't listen, and they turned away from him, and they said, God isn't who we thought he was, right? Because they didn't trust him completely. And so they turned away from the truths that God asked him for. And so that's what we see consistently. He sent Moses. He did all of those things in Exodus. And you know what a non-believer says? None of that stuff is true. You can't find any evidence for any of that, right? And God's like, what? Of course it's true. We've heard these stories for thousands of years. I wrote it down. I sent a prophet to give it to you, to hand write it down for you. I sent this for you. And someone who doesn't want to believe just says, no, that's not true. So he sends those things. And so I'm just going to say, so David continues with this. And here's the reason why, because these next two Psalms are really beautiful Psalms. And I wish that we sang songs like this all the time, actually. So he starts out with Psalm 65, verse number 1. Praise awaits you, our God in Zion. To you, our vows will be fulfilled. You who answer prayer, So they recognize he answers prayer. To you, all people will come. When we are overwhelmed, you forgave us. Blessed are those you choose to bring near to live in your courts. So those who follow and love the Lord are blessed because we love and follow the Lord. That's why we're blessed. Not necessarily with stuff. We're blessed because we follow the Lord. So he says, you answer us with awesome and righteous deeds. Here's the stuff that God does, God our Savior. You form the mountains by your power. You stilled the roaring of the seas, the roaring of the waves. The whole earth is filled with awe in your wonders. Verse 9, you care for the land and water it. Water comes from you. You enrich it abundantly. You crown the year with your bounty, which just means the crops come up, right? So God makes the crops come up. The meadows are covered with flocks. Where do you think they came from? They came from the Lord. And the valleys are mantled with grain. They shout for joy and sing. This comes from God. If you want to see God, look around. Psalm 66. Shout for joy to God, all the earth. Sing the glory of his name. Make his praise glorious. Say how awesome are his deeds. And then it says, come and see what God has done. So okay, you go, okay, that's just the earth. The earth could have been made in any way. Here we go. Verse 5. Come and see what God has done. His awesome deeds for mankind. These are actual things that God did for man. 6, he turned the sea into dry land. They passed through the waters on foot. Where did he do that? He did it at the Red Sea with Moses, and he did it at the Jordan with Joshua. He rules forever by his power. His eyes watch the nations. Let not the rebellious rise up against him. So he's saving lives for David, right? David is leading the charge because of God. He says, for you, in verse 10, so this is one of those things that's another tough one. Verse 10, for you, God tested us. For you, God tested us. You refined us like silver. So there were times where refining silver is like a painful process. There were times where God had to do certain things to refine them, right? They weren't ready for what God was able to give. And so they needed to be refined. They needed some suffering. They needed some trials and tribulations. He says, you brought us into prison and laid burdens on our back. You let people ride over our heads, but you then brought us to a place of abundance. So then David says he's going to come to the temple and he's going to give burnt offerings and vows. And he says in verse 16, come and hear, all you who fear God. Let me tell you what he has done. I cried out to him with my mouth. So David is just, come to him. Like, he has lived miracles of God. He says, come to me and let me tell you all about these things that God has done. He believes God is real. Is he to be trusted, right? Is he to be trusted? And they would say probably yes, he was their king. They loved him. They honored him. And so they would probably say yes, he's to be trusted. All right, we finish this one. Praise be to God who has not rejected my prayer or withheld his love from me. All right, this is the last one. Psalm 67. May God be gracious to us and bless us and make his face shine on us. This is also from Numbers. I believe it's Numbers 34. This goes along with what I was saying earlier. May God be gracious to us and bless us and make his face shine on us, the Israelites, the people of Israel, so that your ways may be known on earth, your salvation among all nations. David wants everyone to know that the Lord's face is shining on the Israels, not so they can hold him and keep him from everybody else, but that the whole earth will know that God is God and that God can save all nations, that God is able to do this. That's what God is. God is a savior. He's the salvation for people. And then he wants to praise God. May all the people praise you. May the nations be glad and sing for joy. For you rule the people with equity. So God is good. He rules fairly and justly. He guides the nations of the earth. Sorry, lost my page. And then he just continues to say, may the people praise you. Verse 7 finishes up with God. May God bless us still so that all the ends of the earth will fear him. This is another word that I just want to finish up with this word. Fear is used a lot in the Old Testament especially. And yes, it is some literal fear. Yes, it is also reverence. I think that we don't have a proper word that encompasses the way that we should honor the Lord. And So we use fear. Sorry, mic drop. And so we use fear as an easier expression, where I think it's a lot of things. I think fear encompasses actual fear. I think it encompasses praise. I think it encompasses worship. I think it encompasses love. So it's this whole big thing, because he obviously loves him. It's not just that he's scared of him, right? Like David isn't just like cowering and going, "Oh, please don't hurt me." Um, Although there is some of that. So I think that when the term fear is used, a lot of times reverence is used instead, especially if you're using a King James version or a New King James version, and that might be a better, that might be a more reliable translation. But like I said, I think it just encompasses a much bigger word. It's not just a one trick pony. It's not one emotion. It's multiple emotions that we should be feeling in relationship with the Lord and the way the Lord is with us. So fear the Lord in all things. That's it. We're done for today. Going inside because it's getting windy. Um, if this was a blessing to you guys, I want you to like it. I want you to share it with other people. I want you to subscribe to the channel so it comes up every day. Remember, this is an everyday reading. That doesn't mean that you need to be on it every day. If it takes you 2, 3, 4 days to read the reading, because it's like 3 or 4 chapters, that's fine. Just keep reading. Keep reading. Keep plugging in. Keep commenting. I want to hear from you guys. I love to hear your thoughts, especially the way that you feel about God. I want to hear what it is that God is showing you as you guys are reading this. So stick with me. See you tomorrow and keep reading.